Hey friends, Heather here from the Sewing Loft, and I'm sharing a new Halloween-inspired quilt block. It's the Jack O'Lantern. It's a patchwork construction and easy to make. Let's take a look at the assembly and see what I mean. After cutting all of our pieces to size, you're going to need to do a little bit of prep work. Some of the smaller squares you will need to draw a line from corner to corner. Now you can use a heat erasing marking tool and a ruler to do this, or I'm going to use on my Baby Lock Destiny the laser guide beam. So go ahead and prep your pieces as needed, and then we can move on to the next step. I'm going to start with the bottom unit, and this is going to create the base of our block. Placing the white squares or the background squares in each corner, we're going to stitch right on our line. After stitching, you'll trim away the excess fabric, leaving 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to put this off to the side and then start to build our smile. Placing your rectangular units, you'll be doing again the exact same motion just like we did with our squares and stitching from corner to corner. Now you can easily take your ruler and heat erasing pen and draw the line again if needed. This is very similar to creating bias binding. We're going to do this to both sides. Trim away your excess seam allowance and then place it off to the side. To create our next row, we'll be using 3 main orange blocks and 4 of our smaller black squares. We'll be stitching them in the same manner like we did for our base unit and trimming away all of the seam allowance. So go ahead and stitch these and trim away all of the excess seam allowance. After everything is stitched and trimmed, press your squares down per the pattern instructions. With our pieces trimmed, it's time to just stitch them together. You'll notice, based on the instructions, all of our squares are actually pressed in different directions, which allows us to have our seams nest perfectly. Nesting those seams allows us to capture that perfect point. With your row complete, you can press it as per the pattern instructions and leave it off to the side. Now it's time to continue building. We'll be starting with our larger squares. Okay, it'll mean you'll need 4 to complete the row. You'll notice that each square actually contains a piece for the eyes. I suggest that you stitch all of these first, and then we can go back and attach the nose. With our eye details in place, it's time to work on our nose. Using 2 of the larger squares, we'll attach them in the same manner to the center. After you have them stitched, go ahead and press each piece per the instructions in the pattern. With our pressing complete, it's time to just join each square together to complete the entire row. You'll notice again, if you follow the pressing instructions per the pattern, that our seams will nest together nice and tightly. After pressing is complete, put this row off to the side and let's begin our final pumpkin row. You'll need all 4 of your orange squares and the last 4 pieces of your eye detail. We'll be using the same method and placing them in the corner of our 2 eyes. These larger squares will create the eye detail and really give it that hollowed out look. Stitch from corner to corner on each unit, just like we have before. Now you can see here that I'm working from side to side on my row. This is very easy to follow and makes it perfect for beginners. But if you feel confident in your sewing skills and are ready to just dive in, you can tackle each one of these squares just by stitching them in place. Just remember, if you're using a directional print, that you may want to make sure that everything is lined up before you start stitching. With all of our pieces stitched, trim away the excess, press them in place, and then join each unit together to complete our row. To finish creating the shape of our jack-o'-lantern, we'll be taking our background squares and attaching them in the same manner to each corner. Trim our seam allowance away and press to add to our current stack of rows. Now it's time to create our final row. We're going to be taking the two upper background squares and our little piece of brown, which is going to be our stem, and just stitch each one together. After stitching, take everything over to the pressing station and press all the units nice and flat. With all of our rows pressed, it's simply a matter of joining them together. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. After getting each row stitched, it's just a matter of pressing it and trimming it to size. Don't forget that you can download the pattern and full instructions at thesewingloft.com. And be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you can have even more quilt blocks added to your library.